Hello, good afternoon. Um, my name is Scott Watts with NRTC. As many of you know, NRTC is dedicated to supporting our rural communities by providing um, technological solutions, one of them being our focus on cybersecurity. And as we know, the threat landscape is constantly evolving, and uh, rural cooperatives are increasingly becoming high value targets for cyber criminals. um, and those attacks can disrupt essential services, compromise your data, and cause significant financial and reputational damage. So, recognizing these risks, NRTC has partnered with Silver Sky, a leading cybersecurity firm, to help us provide comprehensive cybersecurity solutions to our members. One of these is our managed detection and response service that Chris Martin Cabbage is going to talk about today. So, with that said, I'd like to introduce Chris, Director of Solutions Engineering from Silver Sky.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, thank you, Scott. So again, my name is Chris Martin Cabbage. I'm the director of our solutions engineering team here at Silver Sky, and really excited to be here today to really talk to you guys and really dive into what we're doing for our clients in terms of helping them gain visibility, and being able to not only respond but help work with our clients to help alleviate their security concerns. So with that said, where we're going to start off today is we're actually going to start with a quick poll question. So if you want to go ahead and pop up that poll, we can kind of get that out. But really, we want to understand, what is the biggest security concern keeping you guys up at night? We put in some of kind of the top things that we've been hearing in the industry, and we just really wanted to kind of put it out there for the group at large. Right. So I'll let you guys go ahead and continue to submit your answers there. And as we do that, what I'd like to do now is just talk a little bit about who Silver Sky is. So Silver Sky is a US-based company. We've been around for over 25 years. About 15 of those years, actually, I've been a part of the organization. I actually started as a night shift analyst, pretty fresh out of college. Really kind of, helping our clients by, examining security alerts and investigating security alerts, as well as working with our firewall and security device management teams. I did that role for a number of years before actually moving over into a SOC management position, where I actually ran one of our security operations centers, a 24/7 operations center. At that time, that specific facility had around 32 different security analysts, with an additional 12 or so engineers. But enough about me. But Silver Sky, again, 25-year-old company, has been providing cybersecurity services now with over 4,000 clients. We have over 300 dedicated security specialists across all of our facilities. We actually have 4 security operations centers now, our primary one being in Raleigh, North Carolina, with an additional one in Belfast, Ireland, as well as Manila in the Philippines. We've just recently opened up our Fort Lauderdale Security Operations Center, so we're very happy about that. I actually got to get our little map updated here. And with that said, we've really focused our attention and really being able to provide clients our managed detection and response services. So we have a long history and experience in various DoD sectors. So we actually have some projects that were kind of formed out of the DARPA agency, which is essentially kind of a research organization funded by the US government. One of the things that we really take pride on here at Silver Sky is our vendor neutral approach. One of the things we recognize is that, our clients all have very diverse networks, diverse assets and security controls. And so making sure that we can work with them is actually paramount, because we don't want to leave anyone out in the cold. Now, with that said, we have made some strategic technology partnerships with certain vendors in order to really provide the best of class services for our clients. So this would include things like Fortinet, SentinelOne, IronScale, Cynet, which we'll be talking about a lot today, Microsoft, Mimecast, a whole slew of them. ultimately, what this has done is provided us a really robust portfolio to provide for our clients. If we actually tear apart and what we do as an organization from a service and products perspective, what we've actually done here at Silver Sky is actually aligned all of our services and capabilities to the NIST cybersecurity framework. And the reason we did this is because we found a lot of different individualized security standards or compliance models that our clients were following. They have a lot of overlap with NIST, meaning if you're following NIST, then more than likely you're about 80% to your specific security compliance or framework. With that said, we've kind of overlapped our capabilities with the NIST CSF. So, in the top left, you can see there things like security controls management. So we actually have the ability to do everything from managed EDR, so managed endpoint detection and response, to things like managed next-gen firewall. We even have a lot of experience and capabilities with managed email security and are most definitely experts within the Microsoft stack. Now, with that said, we also provide a lot of coverage for things like attack surface management. And what we're talking about here is really a combination of both managed services as well as professional services that are delivered by our professional services division within Silver Sky. This includes things like vulnerability management, where we can help identify outdated software misconfigurations within your environment, and a whole slew of other possible vulnerabilities which might exist inside of your organization's assets. But additionally, from a professional services side, we also offer things like penetration testing, advisory services, compliance and security gap assessments, all types of different things. One that's actually very popular as well is dark web monitoring. So being able to identify where kind of potentially leaked credentials and information about your organization might be publicly available. But really the cornerstone of Silver Sky's offering is really our managed detection and response service. With our managed detection and response service, we're combining our 4 now global security operations centers with really our best of breed detection platform, which is made up of a whole slew of different technologies, best of breed technologies that we've brought to a managed offering for our clients. Within our managed detection and response service, we allow our clients to really create their own custom workbooks, defining their own custom response plans, and leveraging our security operations center analysts and engineers to be able to not just notify you when something bad's happening in your environment, but also be able to actually take action. And we're going to talk a lot more about that as we go through. And then lastly, I don't want to leave out breach management. We do have offerings around managed incident response, where we can essentially put on retainer various hours as well as some exercises from a breach readiness perspective. So tabletop exercises, but also being able to have us already kind of online should you guys need or someone calls an incident and we really need to get the forensic folks in there. Silver Sky has the ability to do that. But as I stated earlier, really MDR is really our cornerstone offering. And so with that said, I really kind of want to dive into a little bit of how it works. When we talk about MDR, we're talking about essentially taking the security controls that you've already deployed and really maximizing the outputs from them. And then furthermore, using those security controls to actually be able to issue remediation responses as a result of those investigations. The first step within our MDR service is to ingest. So essentially be able to pull in that data from your environment so that we can ultimately, one, provide data retention. By default, we actually provide a 1-year data retention policy. We can't expand that beyond that, but I'll talk more about that later. And really create a data silo for all the information coming from your security controls and assets. From there, we then analyze that data. So we run it through our detection platform, which is made up of multiple different technologies, things like threat intelligence, user and entity behavioral analytics, as well as even a more traditional SIM, which I'm sure most of you are aware of today or familiar with today. With that said, our security operations center teams then respond. So once we see any signals or indications of any malicious activity inside of your environment, we're going to run really deep investigations. Our analysts are tooled with tons of different resources to help them be able to investigate these different security incidents and really then start taking action. For us, taking action is actually twofold. With many other organizations, it's kind of alert past the hot potato, meaning we saw something, we're going to tell you about it, and really put all the requirements and responsibility of remediating on the end user. Us here at Silver Sky, we don't really like that. We've developed a system that allows us to not only notify our clients, which is very important, but also be able to take action. Within our service, we've actually pre-built several different methods or capabilities, including things like blocking IPs on your firewalls, isolating machines, and even disabling users. But we're not limited to just those actions. We can also leverage the security controls that you guys have deployed, the ones that you've invested in, and also execute responses within that. Now, the second side of taking action is also helping our clients really understand the threat and be able to help really kind of apply, additional steps that they might take to further remediate. As I always say, by doing our active response, we're kind of putting a tourniquet, and in some cases outright doing the full remediation. But we're also going to give you the information so that we're kind of delivering the vaccine, so to speak. So this kind of feedback can be everything from recommendations of modifications of different configurations within your security controls, all the way to something as simple as, hey, we see that you're running outdated software. You might want to consider patching this particular application. Or even changing configurations within some of the systems, like maybe an attribute to one of your domain controller group policies. So again, it's not just notifying you that there's an issue, but it's also taking action and being kind of working with you hand in hand to make sure that ultimately, you're reducing the risk inside of your environment. Now, from that, we'll also take lessons learned. So having 4,000 plus global clients, this allows us to really kind of hear what other clients are doing, get recommendations that we make sure are very pointed for our clients. As part of our SOC teams, we actually have these meetings inside the SOC where we actually kind of brainstorm on things of how we can do things better. Another part of the lessons learned too is just the fact that here at Silver Sky, we are extremely big on customer feedback. In fact, as we get into some demonstrations a little later, I'll actually show you how we use client feedback to ultimately offer a better service for our clients. So really, kind of how does it work beyond just ingesting, analyzing, responding, and taking action? Well, this is kind of a little diagram that shows you kind of how we actually technically put our MxDR service together. First and foremost, on the left-hand side, you're going to see think of these as client controls. So whether we're talking network security controls, endpoint security controls, email, even cloud services, that's really one of the neat things about what we do here at Silver Sky. We're not just looking at on-prem. We're also looking at those SaaS, PaaS, and infrastructure as a service services that you guys might be leveraging and want to bring them into the fold when we talk about doing our MxDR services. Now, from there, we do have our security log ingestion, which I've talked about a little bit, but ultimately, we really kind of have two different lanes that we can offer our MxDR service in. We recognize that there are some of our clients are very heavily integrated into the Microsoft stack. You might not be aware of this, but Microsoft actually has a built-in SIM and SOAR platform called Sentinel. And when you're leveraging the right level of Microsoft licensing, this is actually made available to you at no additional cost. And we actually have an offering that aligns to specifically managing and monitoring that Microsoft Sentinel tenant. But we also recognize that some of our clients aren't necessarily jumping in the pool when it comes to Microsoft. Thus, we also have our own Lightning MxDR service. This is going to make use of the proprietary technologies that we built, as well as procured, best of breed technologies, to ultimately drive that detection and response mechanism. From there, ultimately using our global security operations centers and really working with our clients closely based off of things like custom tailored response playbooks, we're ultimately delivering a service that's ultimately going to protect our clients and make sure that they have the information they need to be able to move forward and ensure that their environments are secure. Now, one of the things that we include as part of our Lightning MxDR service is going to be EDR services at no additional cost. Now, this is actually delivered through a platform called Signet. And I'm going to be talking about Signet in great detail in today's webinar. But it's worth noting that you're not beholden to have to use our EDR. It is provided at no additional charge. We stand by it, but we understand that if you're maybe comfortable with a current solution or maybe under contract and you need to show value for that current solution, we're more than happy to integrate and work with those solutions as well. So at the end of the day, our clients, they're not forced into using Signet or the EDR that we select, but you can also bring your own as well. Now, with that said, we've got one more poll question for you, because this is really relevant to where the conversation is going to go next. Is, have you guys heard of the MITRE ATT&CK evaluation or MITRE ATT&CK framework? Very curious to see the results on this one, because this is a big part of what we align to here at Silver Sky. Fantastic. And so I see here from the results that around 60% of our attendees actually are familiar with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Well, with that said, I'm still going to cover some basis on a few things. You might ask, well, what is the MITRE Foundation? Well, the MITRE Foundation is a US-based non-for-profit organization that is really involved into various types of research across a wide variety of different things, everything from aerospace all the way to cybersecurity. One of the things they've created over the years is something called the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And I'll be sharing my screen here, flipping over to that here in just a few moments. But within the MITRE ATT&CK framework, what we're doing is MITRE is actually mapping the known tactics and techniques, the known steps an attacker has to take in order to ultimately compromise or exfiltrate data from a victim organization. One of the things they do on an annual basis is they actually have an open door policy that if you're an EDR vendor and you want to bring your EDR solution and have it evaluated by them, what they do is they actually run real world threat campaigns, threat scenarios against those EDRs and simply publish the results. One of the things I really like about the MITRE Foundation is they're kind of the anti-Gartner, so to speak, in the sense that there's no money or anything involved in that regard, but rather they're just posting the raw results from those EDR evaluations. And as you can see, some of the different organizations that have been evaluated, everything from Checkpoint, Cisco, Cybereason, but we also have things like SentinelOne and Signet that have also participated. It's worth noting that when we actually look at some of the results of the EDR evaluation, Signet is actually the only one for the last 2 years that has provided 100% protection and 100% detection and visibility with their EDR solution. And this is for the last 2 years running. So again, this is one of the reasons we partnered with Signet as part of our MxDR and EDR offering, is because we really want the best technology for our clients. It makes our job easier, and it also ultimately makes for better outcomes. When we look at kind of some of the benefits within the Signet all-in-one capabilities, their EDR platform, there's a ton of great things. And what I love about Signet is they extend themselves just beyond simply the endpoint, but also looking at all the things that are ancillary to your actual endpoints. For example, user behaviors and activities, your cloud and SaaS services. By being able to identify potential misconfigurations and also being able to identify risky users and being able to interact with those users, this allows them to not only ensure that the host stays protected, but ultimately the ancillary services and assets and controls inside of your environment are also taken into consideration. So we're going to talk more about this when I jump into the demo here shortly. Now, what I have here, this is kind of just a general mapping of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And in fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to move a window over here. Hopefully y'all can see that. This is actually the MITRE ATT&CK framework as it stands today. This is constantly being revised, so it never stays the same. But I do want to just take a minute and kind of talk you through how it works. At the top here in bold blue, these are tactics. So these are ways, methods in which an attacker can do certain things. So for example, you see things like reconnaissance, defense evasion. Now, in these columns, these are actually techniques. So these are ways that they can do the tactic. Now, the way this works is moving from left to right shows kind of the stages that an attacker will put your organization through when they're targeting you. We look at kind of some of these Hollywood movies and you see them slamming on the keyboard and all of a sudden they go, hey, I'm in the database and I'm going to pull out the proprietary information. It just doesn't work like that. The reality is it's much more pragmatic. There are certain steps. There's a process to the attacker's campaigns. And those typically start, as we see here on the far left, with things like reconnaissance. They then might try to gain initial access, might try to get escalated privileges, might try to do some defense evasion. Once they're in that low-level asset, they might try to do things like move laterally to some more of those prized after assets inside of your organizations. And then ultimately, will try to do things like data exfiltration or impact your environment altogether. Now, when we look at the techniques, these columns, these are going to be different ways that they can do those tactics. So, for example, a few examples I'll share with you is for reconnaissance, they might scan you, active scanning, port scanning, running essentially vulnerability scans against your environment to see what's open, what versions of software you're running. When we even see things like execution, they might create a scheduled task through a malicious file that will ultimately infect a machine. They may even try to do things, for example, when it comes to lateral movement, such as using replication through removable media, for example, like infected USB drives. At the end of the day, the important part to think about when we look at the MITRE ATT&CK framework and looking at all these different tactics and techniques that the attacker has out there, the thing we want to do is we want to turn all those boxes green. So, it's our job as security practitioners to make sure we're closing the door with either a detection or a protection capability that offers us kind of a heads up when potentially one of these tactics and techniques is actually being exploited. This is a big part of how we progress our MxDR service and how we improve it over time. In fact, as part of our services here at Silver Sky, we do offer mappings for our clients to the MITRE ATT&CK framework so that we can actually show improvement over time. Now that I've talked a little bit about the MITRE ATT&CK framework, I want to now talk about a little bit about their EDR evaluation. So what I've popped up here, and I'll actually share this link at the end of today's session so that you all can do your own independent analysis. But you can actually pit up head-to-head various EDR solutions. Now, what I've done is I've actually pulled up results from the 2023. 2024 was released, I believe, in December, and we expect the same for 2025. In this case, what we've done is I pulled up some of the big vendors of the time. A few years ago, CrowdStrike, Cynet, as well as Carbon Black. And we can see here, Cynet actually did actually have the best results when it came to the 2023 Turla. But even if we move forward to things like Enterprise in 2024, see here, we can actually see some of the results coming from the 2024. And I'll go ahead and select a few here. We'll do Sophos, why not? And we can even see here that, again, Cynet, perfect coverage. Again, they are the only EDR vendor for the past 2 years that have provided 100% detection and protection capabilities. So again, this is just kind of the way we see really ensuring that our clients' environments stay safe. The last thing I want to touch on before I kind of dive into some of our interactive demos is I really want to touch on kind of the deployment. You could have the best solutions out there, but if it's absolutely painful to get it running, it might not be the best solution. Here at Silver Sky, we've really worked hard and spent a significant amount of investments to ensure that our service deployments are as smooth and as timely as possible. Our typical deployments for service are roughly 4 weeks, around 1 month. In fact, I believe we're tracking right now around a 25-day average for deployment with our current queue of clients in our deployment process. The idea here is to not only work with our clients to ultimately get those ingests all configured, but also go through tuning, making sure we're also doing things like customer training, and then obviously going to do a operations handoff, so service go live state with our security operations center. So again, a lot of investment has been made to make this process as painless as possible for our clients. Even things like SINET, for example, getting that deployed to your endpoints. I've been lucky enough to be on calls with our deployment teams where we've literally deployed hundreds of workstation in the matter of just minutes. So again, something we've really worked hard to make sure works as smoothly as possible. So with that said, before we hop into some demos, we do have one final question for you. Oh wait, no, actually, we'll scratch that. We're actually going to jump into some of our demos. We'll save this for afterwards, actually, this poll question. So let me go ahead and pull up my demonstrations that we're going to go over today. And boom, here we go. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen once again. All right. And where I'd like to begin today is within SINET. So we have talked a little bit about SINET in terms of obviously their stellar results with the MITRE EDR framework, EDR evaluation, I should say. But I figure I'd take a few minutes and actually kind of show you around some of the features. One of the things I've found in talking and communicating with clients is that, not only is SINET a great cybersecurity tool, but it's also a tool that even IT administrators can use to make their jobs easier. So as part of our service, you do get full access into the management console. Here at Silver Sky, we're very transparent in terms of what portals and dashboards we provide our client. If there's a technology that's part of it, you can have access to it. And so SINET is just a perfect example of that. So we saw why MITRE EDR evaluations says SINET is good, but I always like to put in my 2 cents. One of the things I really like about SINET is just the way that they look beyond the host. Most EDRs live in this bottom right-hand quadrant. They only care about really your host. They care about, the different scripts or applications that are running on it, links that are clicked in terms of determining whether or not they're impacting the actual operating system. But the reality is, in today's threat landscape, that we really have to be a little bit more aware. And SINET does an excellent job of that. And they do that by actively monitoring things like network. So network communications coming from in and out of your endpoints. It's also going to monitor the files that are being accessed inside of your inside of specific host. And lastly, it's also going to look at users. So the users that not only log into one machine, but the ones that might log into different machines and their activities across your entire landscape. So with that said, I feel the best spot to really kind of dive into some of the capabilities of SINET is to really look at actually some of the settings. Within some of the settings here in the configurations, we can actually uncover some of the neat features that are included with SINET. So first and foremost, SINET does offer groups. What groups means is that we can apply specific policy profiles to specific sets of endpoints. What does this mean in the real world? Well, all simply put, it means that you can be very granular. Laptops aren't the same as workstations. Workstations aren't the same as servers. And each of these might require special configurations. With the groups inside of SINET, we can administrate very specific profiles to each of the endpoint groups that we've created. So any of these things that I'm about to go through, we can customize for specific endpoints inside of your organization. So let's take a look at some of those profiles. Well, first and foremost, under the basic profile section, this is where we're going to configure things like our exclusions and whitelisting. There's also some other great features. I'll touch on these, but I want to take a minute and talk about the profile, the whitelisting. Most EDRs, they have exclusions. And exclusions work. You have that application that your EDR always thinks is bad and is always going to block, and that can become a headache. But that can also become a risk to your environment by using an exclusions entry. When you enter an entry into the exclusions, you're basically telling the EDR, don't look at this, don't respond to it, don't put any protections against that specific entry. SINET sees this as a potential risk, but at the end of the day, it is a necessity. So what SINET has done is they actually created an allow list. Now, with the allow list, this is actually going to monitor those entries, but not enforce any protective actions. Meaning, if you were to whitelist, let's say, a folder and somehow a malicious file gets put on there, we would actually be able to see insight to it. And although protection might not take place, our security operations center teams can then react to any alerts we see coming from it. In fact, as we start looking at alerts, you'll see they give the end user within SIGNet the option to put it in the allow list first. They want you to come into the profile section to put it in the exclusions list. It just creates a best practice kind of workflow for whitelisting different entries. It's also worth noting, SIGNet includes an antivirus at no additional cost that's built into the service. What's neat about these antivirus is that we can not only schedule scans, but we can also do them based off of specific events. For example, a USB device or mass storage device being inserted into a device. So again, just providing an additional layer of protection inside of your environment. Now, for us here at Silver Sky, SIGNet is a key piece, not only from an EDR perspective, but it's also a key piece of how we deliver our MxDR service. With other MxDR providers, what you'll find is that, they want you to have an EDR. They're going to install an agent, a log forwarding agent, and they may even install a third agent that's going to take actions. Well, being partnered with SIGNet and being able to deliver, the EDR as well as this as an endpoint agent, we're really minimizing the footprint that we put on our clients' endpoints. And we do this through this section right here, through the Windows events. Under this section, we can actually specify what specific operating system logs that we're actually going to forward, and you can see here, to our external SIM. And that external SIM is part of the detection platform within our MxDR solution. So this allows us to essentially look at all the operating system logs from all of the hosts that are running SIGNet and be able to incorporate them into the MxDR service. Now, another neat thing I always like to brag about is we can see the best practice profile. This is actually created by SIGNet. You'll see they've got about 80 entries. But for us, we've actually had to amend this and create our own profile because we have a lot of use cases in our SIM. And so what we've done is mapped all the different Windows event IDs to specific use cases that are built into our SIM. This list is constantly changing. I believe we're up to around 320-ish different event IDs that we're going to capture from your environment. So again, working hand in hand, minimizing your footprint, we're just a great partner with SIGNet. Additionally, we can also do file monitoring. So we can actually look at specific extension types within your systems. So anyone who works or touches any file with these extensions, we're going to be able to actually monitor and gain insights. Ultimately, when we're investigating a security event, this provides us a ton of great value. It just gives us more forensic information. I'll be sharing what that looks like here in a few moments. Additionally, as part of SIGNet, we're also going to do storage device control. And in fact, if we actually look at the MITRE ATT&CK framework, in fact, let me see if we can go back here. So if we go back to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, we can see that one of the ways that attackers will gain initial access is through replication through removable media, that infected USB device. Well, SIGNet recognizes this, and they created storage device control. Within storage device control, we can actually create restrictions around USB, Windows portable device, SD card, and SCSI removable storage devices. So we're protecting, we're turning that box of the MITRE ATT&CK framework green with both detection and protection capabilities. Some other great features inside of SIGNet: user behavioral analytics, essentially looking for deviations to baseline activities of users inside of your environment. So for example, you log into your workstation day in, day out. Let's say your account gets compromised or someone gains access to your machine. And let's say they start logging into other machines that you don't normally log into. Well, we've got a UBA that actually looks for things like, first time logging into a machine. Or perhaps you're an office that's Monday through Friday. No one should be logging in on a Saturday or Sunday. Well, that would be a deviation to baseline activities. Thus, we have a UBA. It's worth noting, too, we can always create new UBAs. So if you have a specific use case that you'd like us to implement, we're more than happy to do that. One of my favorite things inside of SciNet is also deception-based technologies. For those of you not familiar with deception-based technologies, what we're talking about is the ability to create essentially traps inside of your network. The reasoning behind deception is to provide coverage for the insider threat, whether it's a rogue employee or maybe a trespasser who's gained access to a trusted terminal, or maybe someone's laptop gets stolen and it's they've got their credentials or something along those lines. With SciNet, we can actually create fictitious users, breadcrumb files, as well as emulated network devices that hang off of the agent. So the way this works is if I was on a host running the SciNet agent and I was running this profile and I did a lateral scan, said, hey, what other machines are on the same LAN as me or same subnet? In this case, it would actually pop up with a Windows 10 and a Windows Server 2022 device. Now, I can assure you, these aren't real devices. These are simply emulations that have been created by the endpoint, the EDR software, that is. And the idea here is that any interactions with these emulated devices generates an alert, because a trusted user shouldn't really be doing lateral scans. But if it is a bad actor and they try to, let's say, run a port scan against one of these fictitious devices, we're alerted to it. Additionally, the same can be said for these breadcrumb files. What's neat about these is they can all be customized. So they can look just like real documents that would actually be perhaps floating around inside of your environment. And essentially, any interaction any user has with these files essentially generates an alert and ultimately notifies our security operations center so that we can ultimately investigate them. So really cool thing there. I always call deception a safety net against the insider threat, because if you are dealing with an insider threat, the reality is they've already gotten past your firewall and they've probably already gotten past several other security controls inside of your environment. And this is because, well, they're an insider. So they're kind of a trusted user, trusted device. With that said, I do want to touch a little bit on integrations. This is a really cool feature inside of SciNet. And if you ask me, this goes way outside the scope of what an EDR should be doing. EDR should really just be caring about the endpoint. But with SciNet, again, they see it, a vast kind of sight into not just the endpoint, but your users, your files, and your cloud services. With the integrations here, it's going to provide really two great functionalities. First and foremost, it's going to provide us levers that we can use to respond to threats inside of your environment. This is, again, part of that consolidated agent. So no separate agents on your endpoints enable for us to be able to do things like block a user or reset a password or things of that nature. With these integrations, that gives us levers that we can pull within these services to actually take action. So that's first and foremost. But secondly, it also provides us the ability to gain insight into our different cloud and SaaS services, meaning the possible misconfigurations. So for example, I've got a good example here. I do like sharing. Ooh, sorry, let me scroll down a little. So one I always like to use right here, and this is a good one, is ensure all user password expiration policies are set to never expire. Wouldn't make sense to have a password expiration policy that the policy itself expires in 30 days because it's kind of useless. And in this case, because of that integration we made with Entra ID, we were able to scan and determine that 58 different users inside of this environment did not have their password expiration policies set to never expire. Not only that, but we also provide information on actually how to resolve this particular issue. Now, the best part is here, because at the end of the day, we're doing compliance. We want to make sure that we're following best practice. Within the SaaS and cloud security posture management incidents, it will actually list different security compliance and standards that this configuration is in violation to. So as we can see here, this password policy issue is affecting if we're trying to make HIPAA, if we're trying to align to ISO, PCI, or even NIST. It also looks at things like CIS as well, and a whole slew of different compliance and security standards. Now, from there, the coolest part is let's say, I'm not familiar with going into Entra ID and actually fixing this password expiration policy issue. What SIGNET offers for a lot of these different issues is a one-button fix. So you can go in here and essentially log in, and it's going to go into that tenant and fix this misconfiguration. The idea here is we can track the different potential misconfigurations with how we're applying fixes to them over time. So we can show how we're making the security posture of our SaaS and cloud environments stronger over time. Again, I got to pause because what does this have to do with an EDR? Not really much. This is just SIGNET going above and beyond, providing the ability for us to be able to examine our cloud and SaaS applications and ensuring that they're in best practice. But what about our endpoint? The endpoints are really important as well. And with our endpoints, we can actually identify misconfigurations. So a whole slew here we can see of different misconfigurations. I'm going to pull up a good example right here. Ensure terminal services are set to disable. This is probably, now understand that some of you might need terminal services. There is a way that you can, as you can see here, kind of green light that configuration for a particular endpoint. But in this case, we're again providing you remediation information as well as a description of why this is, why we're even mentioning this as a potential endpoint misconfiguration. We can also reference CIS compliance standards and even MITRE attack framework tactics and techniques that this is kind of opening the door to. Furthermore, we can then actually click in and see our impacted endpoints. So all of these endpoints, except for the closed ones, essentially, have this as a potential, vector for attack. Now, it's as simple as clicking the fix button, and this will actually go into the endpoint and resolve this configuration. Now, in true transparency, the one-click button fix, it isn't available on every single item that's identified, but for a good chunk of them, again, one-click fix to actually resolve these potential misconfigurations. If you've ever heard of the term OS hardening, that's what we're doing here. We're essentially, hardening the configurations of the operating systems that are within scope. Another great possible area that we need to examine is software on our endpoints. So within here, we can also identify software that's sitting on our endpoints that could be misconfigured or potentially has a vulnerability assigned to it. We can even provide things like the NIST link so that you can get information on those specific assets. And of course, dive into those different endpoints that are running that outdated software. So again, SIGNET just, their approach, I love it because it's, hey, let's make sure everything's configured. Let's make sure the doors are locked, the windows are closed before we start, having an armed security guard with a rifle in front of our house. Let's just do the obvious things first. So again, really, a big kudos to them in their thought process of how they've built their EDR solution. So with that said, let's take a look at some alerts. And it's worth noting that, although you do have access into this console, the ultimate responsibility for maintaining these configurations and responding to security events, that falls on Silver Sky. That is not the client's responsibility by any stretch of the imagination. But I do want to share with you what kind of information we get from SIGNET and how an alert is presented, and furthermore, how we can actually react to them or actually take action on them. So the first one I'm going to open up here. Let's see here. I'm going to open up one here. Let's see here, right here. So in this security alert, I was actually attempting to download an EI card test file. If those of you not familiar, that's a test signature for your virus and EDR and other security controls. It's not really bad, but your security controls sure think it is. And in this case, as I was downloading it, we actually set an auto remediation on this one, and it actually deleted this file as I was downloading it. And if we look at the alert here, we can actually get a ton of great information. We can see the path to where this file was. And notice that it says downloads. Well, that makes sense because if we look at the process tree, not only can we see the user that was actually on that application, but we're seeing the application itself. So in this case, Firefox was used to download this test file. What's worth noting too is that we can even get a review of the actual incident analysis. So we can kind of see that the logical steps that either the SOC or our automated responses took when it was actually taking action on that specific threat. But what are some of the other options that we have? Well, when I click up the remediation tab, you'll notice first and foremost, it gives me the option to put it in the allow list, not the exclusions list, because it's good to have eyes on it, even if it is something that we're not going to restrict from a protective capability. But from there, we can actually look at remediations. Now, in this certain case, you'll notice that the three artifacts from those four kind of purviews we saw earlier are users, hosts, and files. So those are the three different kind of artifacts we have as part of this alert. This user was on this host and downloaded this file. So because of that, our remediation is also going to be based off of files, users, and hosts. So for example, we could look at the hosts. I could shut down the machine. And with that said, we at Silver Sky are only going to take action on what you've empowered us to through the response plan. So you'll define that, and we'll touch on that in just a few moments. But I'm just listing out some potential actions that we can take here at Silver Sky. We can do everything from disabling NICs. We can isolate the machine. We can delete a service. Heck, you could give us a script and we can run that script whenever we see a particular type of security threat on that actual endpoint. As you can see, we've got a ton of different options. In fact, a neat thing, the client asked me, well, as an IT administrator, this is awesome, just getting great information. Can I access my endpoints directly from this console? And yeah, you could actually launch a remote desktop session. You could get remote shell. So again, this is not only a great security tool, but it's a great IT administrative tool to help you essentially run your organization smoother. Let's take a look at some user-based remediations. In this case, we can do things like disabling users. We could force a log off. We could even force a password reset or revoke sessions. If we hit revoke sessions, think of your Office 365. It's going to kick it out of your tablet, your phone, your workstation, your desktop, essentially log you out of everything. So again, a lot of options here that we can take from a Silver Sky perspective, from a user-based perspective. And then lastly, from a file-based perspective, well, in this case, this alert, it was automatically deleted because we set that up, that auto remediation. But we could also do things like just quarantine a file locally. We could even kill the process that was interacting with that file. Or in the case that, in this case, a test file that maybe I needed, I could actually undo that file remediation and put it back on the endpoint. So again, these are all different remediation steps that we can integrate into our MxDR service that we provide for you, the client. So the last thing I want to share inside of SINET is going to be the forensic view. Now, there's a couple ways you can get to the forensic view, and I always affectionately call the forensic view the rabbit hole because there's so much information here. And again, even if you're not in security, you're doing IT administration, can be a huge help. There's a couple ways you can get to it. One, you could just click on the forensic tab, or directly out of an alert, you can click on one of the artifacts. So in this case, I'll click on this Lab 01 device, and this is an actual host. Now from here, I'm seeing some great information. I get a cumulative security score, a security rating for this asset. SINET creates a security rating for files, network spaces, users, and hosts from 0 to 1,000. And this score is the result of these various attributes that have been identified on this host. Things like having a unique administrative user gave it a score of 90. Host's external RDP connection, that gave it an additional score of 110. It's kind of doing risk profiling. Now, from there, we can actually look at the files that this host has been interacting with. And it's not just 3. You can see the see more files. So we can actually go into that. And we will in just a moment. But we can see also the users that have interacted on this host and the different network communications that have taken place on this host. But let's say I need to learn a little bit more about the host before I start taking action on something. From here, we can get all the juicy details on that asset. So everything from the CPU utilization, its last known IP address, how many IPv4 connections are on that machine. We can look at the alerts associated with this host. We can look at the different files that have been accessed and their security score. And of course, I can click on this file and we'll show here, it now makes that file kind of the sun in the solar system, so to speak, where it's now kind of the focus of this. But back to our endpoint here, we also have the ability to look at the users that are on this machine as well as their ratings. And of course, I can click on them and kind of pivot over to them. We can look at login activity. Not only can we look at login activity, but we can tell you how this user logged in, whether it was an RDP or a console session. Furthermore, we can look into those traffic patterns. So we can see all the different IPs that a potential host was communicating with. And the neat part is, and hopefully I have a good example here. I'm going to pick this 46 IP address. What we can actually do is any other hosts inside of an environment. Here's a good one. This 40 IP address, we can see that multiple other users and hosts have also communicated with this IP. So this allows us to tie everything together to specific file entries, IPs, or users. So again, learning how things are moving laterally, moving across from devices or users across your organization, SIGNet allows us to make those pivots. With that said, of course, we can do things like be able to provide information on installed certificates, installed software. You can even look at what shares are being published on an endpoint. So again, from an IT administration perspective, like, man, this is just really helpful. Heck, we can even tell you what patches are missing on an endpoint so that you can ensure that your operating systems are all up to date. Another thing I will mention, a cool feature inside of SIGNet is backups. So backups make use of the shadow file copy services inside of Windows. This is a Windows-only function, and it provides protection for your desktop and documents folders. On a periodic basis, it will actually lock those snapshot files and essentially gives us the option to essentially roll back that asset to that pre-existing time. So essentially, we can restore our desktop and documents folders to our backup intervals. So this is, again, something that we could do. Heavens forbid you are a victim of a ransomware. Heck, maybe just a file got deleted by accident and you want it back. You could easily issue a rollback and get those files back to their existing state. So as you can see, this is why I call it the rabbit hole, because again, you can just keep pivoting from thing to thing, jumping around either between users, files, hosts, or network spaces, and see how they're all interconnected inside of your environment. So with that said, this is just SIGNet. This is just the EDR endpoint agent that we use to facilitate our MxDR service. I'm going to spend a few minutes and show you the actual interface that we provide our clients, affectionately called the Lightning portal, that we use to deliver our MxDR service. Essentially, this is where our clients can come in and define their response policy. They can review security cases, generate reporting, define who their authorized contacts are that can work directly with our security operations centers. So with that said, first and foremost, we can look at what devices we're actually ingesting. So all those different firewalls, those cloud services, potential third-party EDRs that you might be running. All of this is essentially how we're ingesting all of these into the MDR service, of course, including SIGNet. Now, with that said, again, we do store all of your logs for 1 year by default. But ultimately, once we have those ingests, we're going to run them through our detection platform. We do leverage FortiSIM as our underlying SIM. We are a platinum partner with Fortinet, and we have been for 15 plus years now. In fact, not to age myself, but I remember when I was having my first son was being born, and I was on paternity leave. I actually have a picture of him sitting on my lap while I'm going through Fortinet training, and this is about 14 years ago, where I'm actually doing some at-home training with my newborn son sitting in my lap. My wife always shows me that picture. Kind of something that always is a nice nostalgic moment for me. But in addition to leveraging the FortiSIM inside of our SOC, we're also leveraging threat intelligence feeds. And you can see here, we actually include 17 different threat intelligence feeds as part of the service. In fact, right now we're tracking about 1.72 million indicators of attack and indicators of compromise. This come in the form of malicious IPs as well as malicious domains. It's worth noting too that you might say, well, Chris, I have a threat intelligence feed that we subscribe to. Well, we can do BYOTI. You can bring your own threat intelligence and we can actually incorporate it into the service. So you don't have to go through those long lists of IP addresses and seeing if any of your hosts are communicating with them. We can make that a part of the service in terms of how we deliver it to you. Now, ultimately, what we're trying to do is create security cases that we can investigate. And so I'm going to open up a sample security case here. In this case, we can see failed VPN logins from outside our country. We can see the SIM was the genesis point for this. We have an auto-generated summary statement. It's going to give us a lot of key information, but there is a formal analysis towards the bottom. We provide ample dashboarding of that event. And these metrics will actually change based off of what's relevant. As we scroll down, we can actually dive into those individualized SIM alerts. In this case, it was the SIM that made the detection, and we can even provide our clients the raw logs that we use to make that detection. So in this case, we can see those AAA authentication failures directly from a Cisco Firepower threat defense device. And we can actually, we're showing you our evidence. This is our burden of proof. This is our smoking gun as to, why we believe this is a brute force attempt against your VPN services. Now, below that, you're going to see our formal analysis written by our Security Operations Center analysts, where we're really going to try to describe the who, what, when, where, and why of that particular security event. We'll also put in a remediation section, which will reiterate what actions we've taken based off of the response plan that you've identified. Now, remember, I was talking about client feedback, and I promise I'll be done here in 2 minutes and we'll take some questions. But one of the things that we care a lot about is feedback. And within our comment section, this is one of the ways we can elicit feedback. You can post your comments, questions, concerns. You'll see an analyst respond in line, so it becomes like a chat. But let's say you needed a special handling case for this type of an alert. We can actually create handling notes. And with these handling notes, we can say this is a special request. It's only for the firepowers, for these particular IPs and signatures. And, client does not want us to call them in the middle of the night for this level event. They just want an email during the next day's business hours. This is not important to them. Once we save this gets parsed out into a knowledge base that we build for each of our clients so that we can really customize the business outcome you're looking for. So that's a security case. The last thing I'll share real quickly is going to be the actual response plan. The response plan our clients define, and we can break it up between during and after business hours, essentially aligning specific criteria like severity level, classification, or asset group. You can elicit specific actions that our SOC team can take. So everything from just a simple phone call or email to doing things like isolating a machine or blocking an IP or disabling a user. Again, we can even extend this to other actions that other security controls you already have deployed that are in effect. So with that said, I'm going to now open it up. And we have one final poll question here. And I'll let the folks go ahead and publish that poll, and we'll go ahead and we'll move it on to questions if we have any from the audience.
Chris, there was a question that came in regarding the EDR, and you mentioned earlier about that clients could keep their existing EDR solution. Someone
Absolutely.
asked if they could use 2 different EDR solutions at one time.
So you can, but we don't recommend it because oftentimes you have to be very careful in whitelisting each of them so they don't block each other or have any interoperability issues. So if you were to have your own EDR solution, we would simply deploy SINET in a passive mode. You'd still get the benefit of all the detection that SINET can make. So it'll still generate alerts, but it just won't act on them. So this allows us to make sure that we don't cause any issues with any existing EDR solutions.
How easy would it be to turn up the SINET then if someone decided they wanted to switch in that case?
Great question. So we actually have a number of clients who, they might be under contract with a current EDR. Once we have SINET deployed as our endpoint agent, it's literally for us, it's a flip of a switch to, in fact, make it a full EDR. So if you were, let's say, migrating after 6 months or something to the SINET EDR, it literally it takes place in a 5-minute phone call, and then at that point, the EDR is in full force, and you can go ahead and remove the existing EDR solution. So it's already done. Excellent.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for attending today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thank you.